What's going on with you guys? This is Barrington Bowen, and if you're a part of the Eva cultural tradition, I'm also known as Eva Corday, coming at you guys today with a review of Bel-Air episode 1. I wasn't even going to watch this show, to be honest. I really don't typically watch mainstream media a lot these days. There's a lot of weird stuff integrated into many of these shows, so I tend to stay away. But I was pleasantly surprised when I took a look into Bel-Air the other day. A tremendous fan of the original series. So my biggest fear in watching the show was that they were just going to completely tarnish it. But I was actually very impressed, which is not easy to do with me when it comes to narrative art. So I based my review around 4 sections. The first section is story. Second is plot force. Third, the and so. And then I go over some of my impressions and takeaways, things I'm looking out for in the following episodes. So what is story? Story, according to Lisa Cron's Story Genius, story is the underlying energetic force that drives narrative arts forward. A story, in most circumstances, is comprised of a protagonist, and they have a particular worldview that is wrong or skewed, brought about by previous circumstances in their life, and this misbelief, this worldview prevents them from achieving their ultimate desire. Story usually ties a protagonist to one particular goal that they're after, and in Bel-Air, what the protagonist Will is after is simply to become a basketball star. The misbelief, or the skewed view, is that his future leading towards this achievement is confined to West Philly. Now, story, this energetic force, then leads the pro, or the protagonist, to encounter an unavoidable external circumstance, i.e. the plot. This unavoidable circumstance is designed to ensure that the pro faces their misbelief, grows from having to face this misbelief that they've probably held in their heart for all their lives, and at the end of their growth, possibly achieving their goal or not at all, but ultimately coming out on the other side having become a brand new person, having faced their misbelief. So in terms of Bel-Air, the plot arises in the form that Will, he's a renowned basketball star in West Philly. Everything is going well, and then one of the local hood dudes challenges him to a basketball game, and Will is all about his respect. So him and his boy Trey, shout out to Ice Trey from the original Fresh Prince series, and when they go out to the court, Trey has a gun in his bag for protection, so they head to the court. Will, Trey, hood dude, and another hood dude, call him hood dude number 2, get ready to play, and then the emotional gangster steps in. I don't even remember this dude's name, but he's super emotional. And anybody who knows anything, an emotional gangster is probably the worst type of nigga you want to be around. But anyway, emotional gangster dude, he says, nah, put money on this game. So they put money on the game, and the bet is that Will, I think it's like 10 grand or so that he would give Will and Trey if they won the game. And if he loses the game, Will would have to be working for him as his, I guess, drug slave or some nonsense. But anyway, Will and Trey, they smash on Hood Dude 1 and Hood Dude number 2. They win the game. Hood Dude 1 is upset, so he winds up throwing the basketball at Emotional Gangster. Emotional Gangster pops off. He's mad. He wants to kill somebody. He wants to draw down because somebody hit him on the back of the head with the basketball. So you already know he has to take somebody's life. Will and Emotional Gangster, they get into an altercation. Will swings on the Emotional Gangster. Trey starts getting jumped on. Will pulls the gun out from Trey's bag and fires it off to protect his friend. Cops come in. Both Will and the Emotional Gangster wind up in jail. Next morning, Will is released without any court proceedings, and we come to find out that Uncle Phil pulled some strings that allowed this to happen. And then he is immediately, after getting released from jail, shipped off to Bel-Air by his mom, where he is basically injected into a completely unfamiliar environment. He has to face off with the bank's family's bourgeoisie lifestyle. And this is basically the crux of the plot problem that Will is faced with. He's tossed into an unavoidable circumstance that lands him in Bel-Air. He can't leave, and he has no other choice but to adjust, because back in Philly, the emotional gangster has a bounty on his head. So this is the plot problem that Will is faced with that will inevitably lead to his growth going forward throughout the series. How he adjusts to his life in Bel-Air will ultimately reveal whether or not Will achieve his goal of becoming a basketball star or altogether becoming somebody completely different. There's a lot of little different subplots that are ongoing as well. I'm not going to really dive in too deep into those. You guys can watch the show yourself and figure out what those are. But anyway, what are my impressions from the series? I really enjoyed the callbacks to the original series, from Trey to even the addition of Lisa as an early love interest. We know from the original series, Lisa was introduced to Will in college, but in this series, they're in high school together, and she's also Carlton's ex. I'm interested in seeing how they play favor to Uncle Phil's legacy, or James Avery's legacy as Uncle Phil. He's one of the most iconic Black fathers, and we do know that with most mainstream shows, the portrayal of the Black father is complete garbage and trash. And I'm hoping that they don't do that with such an iconic character. But to be fair, the dude who is playing Uncle Phil did his thing. He did very well, I believe, in this first episode, especially in that conversation that he and Will had, where Will is struggling to cope with the new environment. He even wants to leave, but they eventually are able to come to an understanding that Will rough it out. I was really impressed by the rendition of Uncle Phil in this scene, because it reminds me exactly of something that James Avery would have said in a similar circumstance. And in many ways he did. I'm also looking forward to seeing how Uncle Phil's decision and the strings that he pulled to get Will out of jail play a part in his ongoing campaign. Another thing I'm interested in is the development of Jazz and Will's iconic friendship. Jazz, as with all of the characters in Bel-Air, have a lot more depth, as they should, in a dramatic rendition to them than the original series. I was impressed by the fact that Jazz actually had something to say to Will. In the original series, he was more so the goofy counterpart to Will, who was also goofy, but Jazz really didn't have much of a character, in my opinion. But in this show, he offers Will some advice, telling him not to lose himself as he is in Bel-Air. So I'm interested in how that plays out. I'm also interested in how things are working out for Will's mom and Trey back in West Philly as they cope with the fact that Will has a bounty on his head and possible implications that might have on them as well. I'm also interested in seeing how the relationship plays out between Carlton and Will. This was another iconic friendship in the original series that played out over many seasons. And in this particular rendition, this dramatic rendition, the tension between Will and Carlton is at an all-time high. Carlton is seemingly a buck dancing goofball, in that his white friends, we encounter a scene after his practice where they're singing hot nigga. His white friends are singing nigga this, nigga that, and he's dancing up a jig with them. Will understandably goes off and calls him out on it. And to be honest, Carlton sounds like a lot of you goofball niggas who let these non-black friends of yours say nigga this, nigga that. Straight goofy. But anyway, I'm very much interested in seeing how their growth or their enmeshment with one another leads ultimately to Will's final transformation that we'll see in parts at the end of the seasons, at the end of the show, etc. So what is the collective and so of this episode? The and so is that Will and Carlton get into a fist fight. That's the end of the episode. So this is going to directly tie into episode 2 as we see the implications of Will's decision to swing on his cousin and how that impacts his settling into the new environment that is Bel-Air. So all in all, I'll give this episode a 9 out of 10. I'm very impressed by how the story is portrayed in Bel-Air, as we have a very clear understanding of what Will is after as far as his basketball career. We have a very clear understanding of his misbelief and that West Philly is the incubator to his success. We have a very clear understanding and a very great rendition of an unavoidable plot circumstance that is forcing Will to face his misbelief and that he's tossed into the bourgeoisie culture of Bel-Air. And finally, we see a lot of takebacks and callbacks to the original series that afforded a lot of nostalgia that I enjoyed and liked. I think that the episode was very well written. The acting was up to par, especially, again, Uncle Phil, the dude playing him, did his thing. So I'm giving this episode high marks. I'm not sure if the series is going to be able to hold these high marks going forward, but we'll see. So let me know what you guys thought of Bel-Air episode 1. Was it worth you guys checking out? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section. Please like, subscribe. And yeah, you guys have a good one.